there is a version of the American dream that looks exactly like this. A gated neighborhood in St. Johns County, Florida, called Mirabella. Sprinklers hissing over green lawns at sunrise. A community pool where kids cannonball off the edge every summer afternoon. Neighbors who wave from their driveways and mean it. It is the kind of street realtors use in brochures, the kind of place people move to specifically because nothing bad happens there. At 9:41 in the morning, on the 27th of August, 2015, a man in a tailored suit walked out of a courthouse holding nothing but a warning. No handcuffs, no bail conditions, just a judge's gentle reminder to keep his distance and take an anger management class. 14 minutes later, he picked up his phone and made one call. Before that call had even ended, the countdown to a massacre was already running. 20 minutes after he hung up, gunfire ripped through a sliding glass door on South Bell Drive, and by noon, 2 women were dead, 5 children had lost their mothers, and a quiet suburban street learned a lesson no brochure ever mentions. Sometimes the most dangerous man on the block is the one who never raises his voice in public. This is the story of Amanda Shelley. This is the story of the friend who died trying to help her. And this is the story of a justice system that looked at a man in a suit with a clean resume and decided he didn't look like a threat, while 2 loaded handguns were already sitting in his car. If cases like this keep you up at night, wondering how systems fail people in plain sight, hit that like button and subscribe to Buried Truth Crime. New case files drop every week. Let's start where every tragedy like this one starts, with a family that looked, from the outside, like they had it all figured out. Amanda Shelley was not a woman who needed rescuing. She had built a serious career at Fanatics, the e-commerce company, where she managed complex operations and earned a reputation among colleagues for being sharp, level-headed, and completely unshakable under pressure. But by every account from the people who knew her, professional success was never the thing she was proudest of. That would be her 2 sons. Trey, born in 2009. Avery, born in 2011. Amanda was the mother at every soccer game, the one who volunteered for every school fundraiser, the parent other parents called when their own plans fell through, because they knew she would show up. Her husband, James Shelley, looked like the final piece of a picture-perfect life. He worked as a senior auditor at Citibank, one of the largest banking institutions in the world, and he wore that career the way some men wear a uniform: sharp suits, polished shoes, a handshake that closed deals. Neighbors in Mirabella looked at James and saw a man who had it all: the title, the income, the beautiful wife, the 2 well-behaved boys who played travel soccer. He showed up to block parties. He coached from the sidelines. He smiled in every photo. But a smile in a photograph tells you nothing about what happens after the camera is put away, behind the closed doors of the Shelley home. Once the porch lights clicked off and the street went quiet, the man neighbors envied became someone else entirely. According to accounts that would later surface in court filings, James Shelley battled severe alcoholism and an obsessive need to control every part of his wife's life. It didn't take much to set him off. A dinner with coworkers, a late meeting that ran past 6. Even an ordinary phone call from an old friend. To James, every one of these ordinary moments became evidence of betrayal, and every accusation was followed by isolation, one friendship at a time, one outing at a time, until Amanda's world had quietly shrunk down to the walls of that house. The fights didn't happen on a schedule. They happened whenever the drinking tipped past a certain point, and they could run from midnight until the sun came up. Hours of shouting and blame dressed up as love. And then, as if none of it had happened, James would shower, put on his suit, straighten his tie, and walk into a bank building the next morning like a man without a single problem in the world. That contrast, the calm professional by day, the volatile stranger by night, is one investigators would later point to again and again as the defining feature of his character. The one person who saw both versions of James Shelley and who never stopped showing up for Amanda anyway was her neighbor and closest friend, Lindy Dobbins. Lindy was a mother of 3 who worked as a manager at a local retail store, and on that street, she was known as the person who noticed when something was wrong. She was the one who brought food without being asked. She was the one who sat on the porch until 2 in the morning if a friend needed to talk. As Amanda's marriage deteriorated past the point of repair, it was Lindy she confided in. The late-night fights, the threats, the fear she was starting to carry into every ordinary day. Neither woman could have imagined that this friendship, built on nothing more than loyalty and casseroles, would put Lindy directly inside the path of a bullet. By the beginning of 2015, Amanda had reached the kind of breaking point most people never have to face in their lives. She understood with total clarity that staying might get her killed, but she also understood that leaving carried its own enormous risk. She chose to leave anyway. On the 13th of July, 2015, Amanda Shelley walked into the St. Johns County Courthouse and filed for divorce. In the paperwork, she documented years of psychological abuse, unpredictable rage, and behavior she described as increasingly dangerous. It was, by any measure, an act of enormous courage, the kind of decision that domestic violence advocates will tell you is statistically one of the most dangerous moments in an abusive relationship, because it is the moment control starts slipping out of the abuser's hands. During the separation, a friend named Lamar Dudley became a steady presence in the boys' lives. He wasn't tangled up in the legal side of the divorce. He simply showed up, driving Trey and Avery to soccer practice, taking them out for pizza, giving two frightened kids something that felt, even briefly, like normal. Amanda was careful, almost painstakingly so, about keeping this friendship private. She avoided being photographed with Lamar. She asked mutual friends not to mention him. She scheduled every visit around James's custody time, terrified of what her husband might do if he felt, correctly or not, that he had been replaced. That fear turned out to be justified. In late July of 2015, while Amanda was away for the weekend, James broke into the home they had once shared. He pulled her clothing out of the closets, carried it into the backyard, and set it on fire. When Amanda returned to find the damage, James threatened to kill her if he ever found out she was seeing someone else. He threatened her dog. He took her prescription medication out of the house. This time, Amanda didn't hesitate. She went back to court and filed for an emergency protective order. The judge granted it. James Shelley was legally ordered to stay away from Amanda's home and her workplace, and to surrender every firearm registered in his name, 2 handguns and a rifle, to the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office. For a moment, it looked like the system was working exactly the way it was supposed to. If you're finding this case as unsettling as I did researching it, go ahead and subscribe now, because the next part of this story is where a courtroom decision changed the outcome for everyone involved. The morning of the 27th of August, 2015, James Shelley stood before a judge to answer for violating that protective order. He arrived precisely as he always did, composed, well-dressed, his Citibank badge still clipped neatly to his jacket. He told the court, calmly and articulately, that he had no history of mental illness, no substance abuse problem, nothing but a clean record in what he characterized as a misunderstanding between two people going through a difficult divorce. It worked. The judge, weighing a well-spoken, high-earning man with no criminal history against a documented history of threats and a house fire in the backyard, issued only a warning: anger management classes, a renewed instruction to keep his distance, no jail time, no additional restriction. James Shelley walked out of that courtroom a free man with nothing more than a piece of paper telling him again to behave. At 9:41 that morning, minutes after stepping outside, James called Amanda. The call lasted 14 minutes. No recording of that conversation survives, but based on everything that happened in the hour that followed, investigators would later conclude it was a final desperate attempt to pressure Amanda into dropping the divorce entirely, and that she refused him. What happened next removes any doubt about whether this was a sudden loss of control. James Shelley did not drive home. He didn't need to. 2 loaded handguns, a 9mm pistol, and a .45 caliber pistol were already hidden inside his car, weapons he had never actually turned over to the sheriff's office despite the court's direct order months earlier. He stopped only once at a gas station to buy beer. Then he pointed his car toward South Bell Drive. Back at the house, Amanda had spent the last 2 days trying to put her home back together after the break-in. Her friend Lamar Dudley was there helping her document the damage for the court record. A domestic violence advocate had stopped by that morning and urged Amanda, in the strongest possible terms, to file criminal charges immediately so police could arrest James before anything worse happened. Amanda, weighing the damage it would do to her husband's career and the trauma it might inflict on her sons watching their father taken away in handcuffs, asked for a little more time. She wanted to talk to her mother. She wanted to talk to her attorney first. Not long after the advocate left, Amanda's closest friend, Lindy Dobbins, arrived with another neighbor, Rachel Hendricks, to help finish cleaning up and to help Amanda put together a safety plan. The three women had no way of knowing that James Shelley's car had already come to a stop on the road behind the house. Around noon, avoiding the front of the property where a neighbor might spot him, James walked across the back lawn and up onto the patio. He raised his weapon at the sliding glass door and opened fire without a word of warning, then forced his way inside, shouting for Lamar Dudley by name. Lamar, unarmed, sprinted through the garage and out onto the street, and it was his call to 911, made from a neighbor's front yard, that gave police their very first report of an active shooting on South Bell Drive. Inside, the three women scattered. Amanda locked herself inside the master bathroom. Rachel Hendricks and Lindy Dobbins pushed into the bedroom closet and threw their weight against the door to hold it shut. Within moments, multiple frantic calls were reaching the St. Johns County Dispatch Center. Dispatchers on different lines slowly realizing they were listening to the same attack unfold in real time from inside the same house. James moved through the rooms calling Amanda's name, demanding to know where Lamar had gone. When he reached the closet and found it wouldn't open, he fired directly through the wooden door. Rachel Hendricks was struck by flying debris and wounded, but in the chaos that followed, she managed to break free, push past James, and run to a neighbor's home for help. Lindy Dobbins did not get out in time. James shot and killed her in the doorway of that bedroom. A woman whose only involvement in any of this was showing up to help a friend clean her house. He then turned toward the bathroom, forced his way through the locked door, and shot Amanda Shelley as well. Both women died at the scene. If domestic violence is something you or someone you love is navigating right now, please know that help exists and it is available anytime, day or night. The National Domestic Violence Hotline can be reached at 1-800-799-7233. You are not alone, and reaching out is not a small thing. It can change everything. James Shelley left the property before the first patrol car arrived and drove out of Mirabella, beginning a frantic, hours-long flight across state lines. On the phone with his own family members during the drive, his voice was reportedly flat and eerily composed. No panic, no apparent grief. Instead, he spent those calls building a story in which he was the victim, telling relatives that Amanda had forced his hand and left him with no other option. Investigators later noted something chilling in his own account of that day. Not once in any of those calls did James Shelley mention Lindy Dobbins by name. The woman he killed simply didn't register as part of his story. Law enforcement issued an alert across Florida and neighboring states within the hour. Schools near the Mirabella neighborhood went into lockdown as a precaution in case James attempted to return for his sons. For most of that day, he seemed to vanish. The break in the case came that evening, hundreds of miles away, in Virginia. A driver called the State Highway Patrol to report a car with Florida plates tailgating her aggressively and swerving toward her lane, with her own 3 children in the back seat. Troopers identified the vehicle as the one connected to the Florida manhunt, coordinated a rolling stop, and took James Shelley into custody without resistance. He was found to be intoxicated, consistent with the beer cans discovered in his car. He asked officers nothing about his wife. He asked nothing about his sons. He invoked his right to remain silent and asked only for a lawyer. The trial began in the summer of 2018. His defense argued diminished capacity, pointing to alcohol and a prescription sleep medication as factors that impaired his judgment on the day of the shooting. But the prosecution laid out a timeline that was difficult for any jury to see as anything but planned. The 14-minute phone call made the instant he left the courthouse. 2 loaded firearms already staged in his car before he ever walked inside for that hearing, and the direct eyewitness account of survivor Rachel Hendricks, who lived through the attack and testified to exactly what she saw. The jury returned a unanimous guilty verdict. James Shelley was sentenced to death. Outside the courthouse, Lindy Dobbins' husband and Amanda's grieving family embraced in tears, the kind of quiet, exhausted grief that comes after years of fighting for an answer. Between the two families, 5 children were left without their mothers, a loss no verdict, no sentence, and no amount of time can fully repair. What stays with investigators, and with anyone who studies this case closely, is how ordinary James Shelley looked right up until the moment he wasn't. A courtroom full of people watched a composed, well-dressed man explain himself calmly, and the court believed him. 2 loaded handguns were waiting in a parking lot the entire time. This case remains one of the clearest warnings in modern domestic violence law. Composure in a courtroom is not evidence of safety at home. A calm voice and a clean record can exist right alongside a documented history of threats, property destruction, and violence. And when those signs are downplayed, the cost can be measured in lives. What do you think? Should courts weigh a defendant's demeanor at all when firearms and prior threats are already part of the record? Let me know in the comments below. If this case moved you the way it moved me, hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to Buried Truth Crime so you don't miss next week's case file.